There's this very obscure word called numerality, and it means the quality of a number, the numberness of a number. If you were a person, you would describe it as personhood. I suppose if you were a number, you would call it numberhood. And I discovered this word while I was on, going down a rabbit hole as one does. In mathematics, you can make most numbers out of a ratio between this and this, something else. So 1-to-2 ratio is a half. 1-to-3 is a third. So if you're slicing up a pizza, you can divide it by 3 and you end up with 1/3. But there are some special numbers that don't respond quite as, don't conform quite as much. And for nonconformists like myself, these numbers hold a special attraction. One of these numbers is pi. Now, pi, for us going back to school, is the relationship between the radius of a circle and the circumference. So on a bicycle, it would be the spoke, they're going from the hub to the outside, and then the bicycle tire would be the circumference. And it turns out this is a very persistent ratio. Pi is an incredibly useful number because it's for bicycle wheels and the passage of stars and atoms and quasars and all sorts of exotic things. The problem with pi is that it cannot be expressed as a ratio of one number over another. Get very close. 22/7 gives you a number that's extremely close and extremely useful. And for most engineering purposes, that's more than close enough. You can land someone on the moon with, 22/7. There are better choices, but whatever. In mathematical language, pi is called irrational because it cannot be described as a ratio of one number over another. And maybe I'm being a little bit picky or OCD-ish, or guilty as charged. But how can the ratio of a radius to a circumference, which is by definition a ratio, be described as irrational, i.e. not ratioable? That defies meaning, that defies logic. And it turns out it's not the only number that does this. 3.14 blah, 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 blah is a non-reoccurring number that goes on forever and ever and ever without actually any repetition. So this fascinating number, which occurs everywhere, doesn't fit in our numbering system, doesn't conform, and so it is described as irrational. And it seems to me a little bit prejudicial, right? Just because pi, this universal, beautiful value, doesn't fit, it's the one that's irrational. Maybe the lack of rationality, to use the word slightly differently, has to do with our numbering system. Anyway, that sent me down a rabbit hole, and numerality is a word I discovered along that journey, and that's why this channel is called that. So that's a question you didn't ask, but I answered anyway.